For our 2014 projects, we have a chip seal that will be happening up on the frying pan. We're taking a look at a subsidence up above Rudai Reservoir on Frying Pan Road as well. On Maroon Creek Road at Aspen Highlands, we have two concrete road intersections that we're going to be replacing. In Redstone, the North Bridge needs a rail replacement. That's an addition, and we'll talk about that since the budgeting that we did, and we went through each of these projects at the budget briefly. This is an addition. And we've got about $2.5 million worth of new budget that was appropriated for this year for roads and bridges and these capital maintenance projects. Our 2013 carryover projects are the ABC Pedestrian Drainage and Improvement Project. That was the interior project within the ABC to add some parking, to add drainage features, to add sidewalks. The other project is the ABC Airport Pedestrian Crossing. That one's been obviously probably the most public project that we've had in a while. We've got about $2 million left on those two projects collectively to spend this year. So the first of the 2014 projects is the Frying Pan Chip Seal. From the Eagle-Pickens County line above Rudai Reservoir to the end of pavement, it's about 12 miles. And so we have planned to do a 5/8 chip seal, that entire length. We also have 6 really aging culverts along there that we're going to plan on replacing during this project. We have a few areas that are a little worse for wear with asphalt conditions, so we're going to do some patching there. We also have some places where we have a lot of frost heaval that we'll try to address those with this project. And we're going to overlay a little bit with asphalt to correct a little bit of drainage issue that we have, restore the crown in the road, and take out some of the old ruts that are there. It's a pretty straightforward project, and we don't have a start date yet. We're working with a contractor right now. We just went under contract with United Companies of Mesa County. They are who performed our chip seal on McLean Flats Road in 2009. And that's one of the awards that we got in 2010 from the Colorado Asphalt Paving Association's last time we worked with those folks. So we're really anticipating getting going in June. We want to take a look to see what the spring runoff condition is like, especially up the upper end, because that's where a lot of the culverts are that we want to replace. And we don't want to have them flowing water from this spring's bountiful runoff while we're trying to replace culverts. But we think that we can get started in June and probably be done and out of there in early August by the time we get everything set and done.
So, GR, the 5/8 size chip seal, that's the same size that was used on McLean Flats Road?
No, this is a little bit larger, and we wanted to go with a little bit of a larger chip up here to add the little bit of structure that we can get with a chip seal. Our traffic volumes up here are 1/10 of what they are on McLean Flats Road, so we felt a bit more comfortable with going with a larger chip. When we talked to a number of bicyclists, and that was one of our primary concerns with McLean Flats Road, who we talked to, a lot of people turn around either at the dam, the next hill after the dam, which is still in Eagle County, or they go to the Meredith store and turn around there. So we didn't have that much as far as lane miles that were traveled by bicycle.
Go ahead, Steve.
Are there any of the 6 culverts, or any of them in stream crossings?
No, these
are they more just ditch drainage from one side to the other?
These are all ditch drainage. We don't really have, we have 2 bridges on Frying Pan Road. We do not have any stream crossings that I can think of off the top of my head, at least, on Frying Pan Road. Everything else is off on one of the side roads that carries the streams.
Okay.
But I believe what you're probably getting at was the aquatic passages that we've talked about in the past.
And I know that was talked about on the Burnt Mountain Road, I think it was, that the Forest Service was going to do a culvert up there.
Yeah, and that's just off the Frying Pan Road, yeah. So, yeah.
Rachel?
Yeah, and so I might have missed it or just asking for more detail on the subsidence issues on the road. Is there a possibility we're going to get into that and find it's a much bigger stabilization?
That's our next slide.
Oh, okay, because I was wondering how we're going to chip seal
Yeah.
it without talking about that part, but, okay.
Is there anything else on the chip
Well, I
seal?
was just going to ask the question of where bids are coming in. I mean, we're seeing a rise in the economy, and I don't know if more counties and road departments are doing work and it's getting more competitive. We budgeted $1,450,000 for this in our budgeting process. Are we meeting our budgeting aspects, or is it going to be a request for supplementals here?
Well, it's project by project, Rob, to be very honest with you. This project came in significantly under our allotted, and we're actually working to change the extents that we assumed for a lot of our patching and our overlay. We're going to expand that to get our bang for our buck while we're up there. Especially after this spring with as many freeze thaws as we've been going through and as much snow as we've been getting this spring. It's been particularly hard on some of our older roads and infrastructure. But this one we're in pretty good shape budgetarily.
Great.
Can I just ask a question? On the chip seal for the bicyclists, you said that the section that you're chip sealing doesn't have bicycle traffic?
Not significant bicycle traffic.
Not significant. And how did you measure that not significant bicycle traffic?
I guess we don't necessarily have any specific traffic counts that included the bicyclists, Michael. What we went with word of mouth. I talked to a number of different cyclists that I know that ride Frying Pan Road.
I just think that we should have a bicycle-friendly policy on chip and seal. So unless there is definite proof that we don't have bicyclists there, because one of the things that is attractive to people around here is actually roads that aren't well traveled. So if it's a low traffic road, bicyclists like to go there. So although I can believe what you're saying, I just think the policy should be that when we do chip and seal, we do it bicycle friendly. That's just something I think we should consider.
And I guess I don't really understand that, Michael. What do you mean by bicycle? Do it bicycle
Well,
friendly?
the aggregate size, 5/8 aggregate
Yeah.
size, is a large size of aggregate. And
Yeah.
so that then becomes a much rougher road than a smaller aggregate size.
So on bicycle roads, use a smaller aggregate if we can.
Well, whatever it takes to be bicycle friendly. So
Okay.
the smoother the road,
Yeah.
the more bicycle friendly it is.
Do you want to respond to that, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely appreciate that input. And we can certainly talk to the contractor to see what it would take to get an additional layer of a smaller aggregate. To give a little context, on Upper River Road and McLean Flats Road, because of the high bicycle traffic, we did a double chip and seal. And we started with a 1/2-inch chip and then added a 1/4-inch chip on top of that. And the effect is that it rides almost as smooth as a new asphalt. The 1/4-inch doesn't get you much as far as structure on the road, but it improves the rideability. And so that's what we performed on those two other roads. That being said, it's essentially doubling the aggregate price of the project. It doesn't double the entire project price, but it's we can get prices for that.
Steve?
GR, do you happen to know what Capitol Creek Road chip and seal, what size of aggregate it has on that? It's been quite a few years, probably.
It's before my time. I'm guessing that it was either a 7/8 or a 5/8.
Because, I mean, bicycles use that. They love going up there just because it's...
Yeah,
With a larger aggregate, it usually takes a few years of the plow working on it to smooth it out.
yeah, it will eventually get packed down by traffic and plows. And I remember years ago when I think Eagle County did the lower Frying Pan Road, that was tough on a mountain bike, never mind a road bike. That was huge, but it took 2-3 years later, it was fine. But you're going to use the 5/8 all the way, starting from the Eagle picking line?
That was the plan. And that's another thing that we can discuss if,
Yeah,
for the first few miles, if we went up to Thomasville or something like that, we can take a look at switching to a smaller aggregate size there. We've got options.
yeah, I would like to see at least that part, because, you know, when you go from Basalt up to Thomasville, that's kind of like a nice 50-mile ride, round trip. And it's true, not many people will ride up beyond there. You know, I'll ride up once or twice a year, and I'll see 1 or 2 bikes, but most of the traffic is up to the reservoir and up to the second hill. But if it gets better aggregate, better road condition, we may see some more riders continuing on. In fact, some people will park at the dam and
Yeah, I
go
mean,
up
that's
just to miss the traffic on the lower Frying Pan, because
Right.
that's an accident waiting to happen.
Right, because the traffic is so intense on that lower part, and
Right.
so fast, that the alternative would be to have a nice traffic-free ride higher up. All you have to do is drive there. You're driving anyway with your bike, so. I mean, just think at a policy point of view, if we're looking for economic development, and a bicyclist guy's gonna spend $5,000 on his bike, another $1,000 on his outfit, and God knows what on wine and dinner afterwards, we should have that kind of policy. It just makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So are we directing,
I don't know, I'm asking for some buy-in from the rest of the commission.
yeah, no, I'd like to see what it lays out on paper regarding our budget too. So I think we're directing GR to bring back some further information to us on, you know, what sort of cost this is, and, you know, look at it on this project, but I think as a policy decision moving forward, if you can come back with some generalization, 20% to a project cost or whatever is what would be added here, so that we could use it when we're going through our next budget series, when we're looking at other roads too.
Absolutely.
Because
And that's what I would ask for.
what is a lifespan when you do a chip and seal? 7 years?
7 years is our, what we expect to get added life out of the pavement is about 7 years for a chip seal, given that you do it early enough that you can get that full benefit.
But the last time the upper Frying Pan was done was
Long time.
It's been a very long
a
time.
very long time.
Rachel?
And so, you know, 7 years is ideal, but we may not see this come back to be redone in 10, 15 years. So, you know, when you spread that cost over the length of the time, it may be worth it to do it well now.
Yeah, I support the general direction of the conversation in terms of evaluating the cost. And I also would like to know if there's a durability difference for it between the two types.
If we get an 8th year.
If anything, if we go to a smaller aggregate in a single chip, we'll actually lose a little bit of life. You know, how much that is, it's really hard to tell, and it's really dependent on from segment to segment of road and what sort of condition, what's going on there. But we can bring back numbers, and I don't have too much hesitation about that.
Sean?
Rob, just for clarification, because I think what I'm hearing is if we can do a double chip that's more bike friendly,
Double chocolate chip.
double or whatever, within budget, that would be the board's preference to scope it that way. And if it's an additional cost to bring it back and have a discussion along those lines, is that correct?
Correct. Steve?
I'm wondering if we should ask the residents of Thomasville and Meredith area if the road was done with 2 different types of finish, what would their preference be on where the switch would be? Seems to me Thomasville might be the logical place, but maybe, I'd be curious what the residents.
Yeah, they might
there
have
would
more
think.
local use above there that we don't
Yeah.
contemplate.
You can ask all 12 of them now.
Yes.
And it doesn't get busy until the summertime, so,
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
think
but they have a
that
caucus newsletter that they put out. I mean, they created a website.
yeah.
Is there anything else on the chip seal? The next project that we're taking a look at this year is the frying pan subsidence. We've got an area of about 450 feet in length on the road, where you can actually see the headscarp via Google Earth. George, is there any way that we can shut off the light? I think you'd be able to see it a little bit better with a little bit more contrast. There you go. That, you can see where we overlaid twice in the last 7 years up on Frying Pan Road.
So this,
Yeah, and so what you're outlining there, Rob, that is actually the headscarp. And what headscarp means is where a landslide shows itself through the movement of Earth. So one area has moved and one area has not. And so that's this boundary right here. And you can see where we've overlaid in here once about 2 years ago, and then you can see the end of an overlay here, where we did it again about 6 or 7 years ago. In digging through all of our records, I found early geotechnical reports from us looking at this in 1986. It was the first record of us actually doing any sort of investigation into this area. And judging by what we've done here, no one was overly concerned in 1986 about it. Every few years we go and revisit this area and try to put some asphalt in where the road's moving to level it out and fix any of the safety issues that we see. But that being said, we were wanting to look for a longer-term solution. Where we're at with this project right now, it's a little, I don't have a staff recommendation for you guys. We went through our first feasibility study, and honestly, the prices that we are coming up with for engineers' estimate are much higher than we initially anticipated. We were looking at something in the tune of $1 million to fix this with a technology that's called EPS, or extruded polystyrene. It's kind of like a styrofoam. You dig out all of the 12 feet of earth and you replace it with this
Miracle foam.
Yeah, with this miracle foam that it literally weighs 1/133rd of the weight of the dirt. And so all you're doing is you're taking a ton of bricks off and you're putting in a couple feathers to take up that space that are structurally sound. But as we're working through all of these, we're not confident of how to tackle this, because there's a lot of different geotechnical aspects that are in play here, and it's a very unique area. I opened up Google Earth here to give some context of where we're at. Here we see about the same pictures I just had in the last slide, and I'm going to zoom out just so you can see where we're at in the world. And we're right here on the up valley end of Rudai Reservoir. We're about a mile from the Eagle County-Pitkin County line. We have a decent geological feature in Red Table Mountain to our north, and we've got a reservoir to the south of the road, so we don't really have anywhere that would be very easy to move this road to get it away from the area. So as we go through different solutions, we've got a pretty small confinement of where we can apply them, and essentially that keeps us in the template of where the road is today. But looking back over what we've spent in the area doing the overlays, it takes a lot of years of spending $20,000 on an overlay to come up to $1 million price tag. Even when you normalize the cost to today's dollars, that's a lot of Band-Aids. That being said, it's a nuisance, and it also, every couple of years, it becomes a bit of a safety issue driving down that portion of road when you have a 2-inch change in pavement height pretty abruptly. So we're going back to the drawing board with this project right now to see if there's something where we can't find a technology that's not going to cost us $1 million. We might not get a 50 or 75-year design life out of, but instead of having to do this every 3 or 4 years, maybe we're doing it every 10.
Rob?
yes, Rachel.
Is it something that, just looking at it, having driven a few times before in the past in different states, Is it something that needs more of a stabilization wall on the downhill side of it?
That's a good question. And I actually did a drawing here that can help explain why it's such a problem.
Yeah, and do we know why it's subsiding? Is there like a spring underneath that's going to constantly?
Well, and that's it. The theory is that it is groundwater. What I hatched out here, this would be bedrock.
Mm-hmm.
This darkened area here, that would be the road, and then we've got Rudai Reservoir here. We've got about 38 feet here. And we installed what's called an inclinometer. And what an inclinometer tells us is where the land is moving and how much it's moving. And we took the first reading this winter when we had some of the snow cleared off the side of the road. And we found that the road had already moved as of this winter. It wasn't a lot, but it was a lot deeper than we had thought. Mm-hmm. It moved all the way down here at 38 feet in between the dirt and the bedrock. And so what that does is it starts making all of these retaining walls, soil nails, micropile walls. It makes them much, much harder to execute because now you need something that goes into that bedrock a decent length. So we're really talking about 50 feet before we have anything that has any sort of strength to it. And so that's why we were looking at lightening the load and digging this whole section out like this and replacing it with something lighter, because that's a significant portion of that cross section. So it's literally lightening the load. And so that's why this is posing us so many technical issues when we're trying to balance that with what's responsible with spending the public's money.
Okay. Can I ask a couple more questions, Rob? Do we know, was this road here before the reservoir, or was this a relocated road when the reservoir got built?
It's my understanding that this is the relocated road since the reservoir was put in the 60s.
Yeah. Yeah, it just kind of makes me wonder whether, because of the reservoir there, is there a higher groundwater content that then is affecting the road? Does the reservoir from the original frac project have any obligations towards the road if it failed or anything like that? I mean, that'd be a stretch, but I'm just wondering if there's a relationship between the stability of the road and just high groundwater levels because of the reservoir.
That didn't come up in our initial studies. It's something that we can take a look at. We have bedrock that's fairly close to the surface for a large portion of this on the uphill side. It's a rock cut on one side, and it's fairly steep down to the reservoir on the other. But we have 100, probably 100 and change as far as elevation difference between the level of the water in the reservoir and where the road's at. So,
Okay.
but we will certainly take a look at that.
And the last question, just as you're considering new alternatives, is there any chance to lower the road so you're closer to bedrock and go ahead and dig it down lower and put it at a lower, closer to the bedrock while we rebuild it? So just to look at it.
Okay, we'll certainly take that into consideration.
Steve?
A similar question, is there any possibility of cutting further into the hill? Up on McClure's Pass, they probably moved the road over into the hill about 4 different times where that land is slipping up there. But since the bedrock is close there, if you cut a little into the hill, maybe it could be all set on bedrock and be rid of the problem.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that, and it's going to be. I took some liberties when I drew this picture this morning. But that being said, we did take a lot of geotechnical data. We drilled 4 holes, one of which is where we put the inclinometer in. We can get a decent idea of where that bedrock is. In general, when we start talking about blasting rock, things get pretty expensive, just because now you have to hire a technical expert as far as that's concerned, and you also have a much higher traffic control costs because you're stopping traffic at pretty significant distances away. But it's certainly something that we'll investigate and we'll put into the mix.
George?
Do you think there's a need to have a guardrail along that stretch?
That's a tough Tough
I mean,
question.
given sort of the ongoing Band-Aid approach that we've been taking, and you feel that you do a patching job on a pothole, and 3 months later that pothole reappears, and it's large, and if you're driving at night and you happen to hit that and steer off, you've got a substantial drop down to the reservoir.
Well, one of the things that we talked about with that and what our safety concerns really were, as we zoom in here on Google Earth, I'm going to try to point out a few of the features that we have. Right here, this is our roadside ditch. This is our edge of oil. The center line in this picture that Google Earth projects is about right, and you can see our edge of oil here. This whole area is a pullout, and it's anywhere from, I'd say, 10 to 25 feet in width. So if we were to install a guardrail along here, what we do is we'd end up closing off that pullout. I don't know how much that pullout really gets used. I'm sure our road and bridge staff uses it to turn around when they're ditching and doing other operational things, but there's plenty of them around to that it wouldn't make me hesitate to put something up there. But we do have a pretty good zone here that would be considered a recovery zone. I don't know if it meets all of the national standards because I haven't studied it yet, but that's just something that we'd consider if we were looking at it.
Yeah, I can't remember if this was the exact point, but I've heard comments from the caucus members concerned about somewhere along this stretch a desire or need for some guardrails. It may not be this exact stretch, I forget, but.
I mean, if the board would like, we can certainly discuss this summer with the caucus of, if there's places that they really believe that near the reservoir there that guardrail would be warranted. We can take a look at it. And I think what we'll be seeing over the next couple years is if we get an increase in these requests for specific guardrail areas, is putting together an actual guardrail specific project. We don't. I'll have to check on our bid. I don't know if we included any of the guardrail on this project or not. If we did, we can certainly add this on if we have that subcontractor coming up. There's really only 2 subcontractors in all of Colorado that do that work. So with that being said, what I'll say now is in the next 2 months, we'll bring back some sort of staff recommendation for this area. As far as skipping it during the chip seal project, I don't have too many reservations about doing this. This would be under 1% of the area of the chip seal project, so it'll be an anomaly when people are driving over it. But that being said, it's a 450-foot stretch out of a 12-mile long stretch of pavement. This last picture is just to show, this is probably 3 or 4 years ago, right before the last overlay that we did in the area, how much the earth had moved through there. And that was probably over 2.5 or 3 years in between the last overlay and that. And so it's a shovel handle and a tape measure that you're looking at, and the shovel handle is put flat up against the earth that had not moved, and the tape measure is sitting on the earth that has moved.
So it's sunk that much? Is that what you're showing?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's kind of that whole thing, that whole chunk of earth against the bedrock is sliding down
Exactly.
uniformly.
Or roughly uniformly.
Roughly uniformly.
The next project that we are going to talk about is the Maroon Creek Road intersection replacements. We have 2 intersections along Maroon Creek Road that are constructed out of concrete. One with Prospector Road, the other with Thunderbolt Lane. This is at the base of Aspen Highlands. These were constructed when that area was redeveloped. I believe that was in the early 2000s. We're looking at replacing all of the roadway concrete the sidewalk and improving the bus turning radius. We believe when this was designed initially that they used a smaller bus than what actually runs that route now to determine what that turning radius should be. And so as we were looking at it, we decided that there's a traffic island that's a safe haven for pedestrians there. And with a minor amendment to that, and changing the radius of the curve and reinstalling the sidewalk, which needs to be repaired anyway, that we could alleviate the bus issue at the intersection so they actually had the right swing distance to make the turn. This project, we are partnering with both the City of Aspen and the Aspen Highlands Commercial Metropolitan District. Sorry, that's a mouthful. Tomorrow, you'll be seeing a resolution for first reading to approve an IGA with the Highlands Metro District. The project split is about 285, 115. As far as contribution, our portion is 285, theirs is 115. A few things that we're going to be doing is they're going to be repairing some of the snow melt that's in their road, and we're going to be modifying it a little bit and taking it out of the curb and making sure that there's some in the gutter pans. What we were having happen was snow would melt on their road, and it would get down to our road, and it was frozen. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you'd have a 4-inch ice dam as you went from one road to the next, because the water couldn't get to the inlet, which is only 15 feet down the road. And so there was snow melt in the sidewalk and in the curb head, but there was none in the gutter pan. So we're going to remove anything that was in the sidewalk and in the curb head and put it in that gutter pan so that the water can actually make it to the appropriate inlet.
Yes, Rachel.
From the inlet, is the water somewhat treated or contained and the silt allowed to settle out before it hits Maroon Creek? Or where does the water go to?
The water does go to Maroon Creek. I haven't had an opportunity to study exactly what sort of inlets. I don't know if they're sump inlets or if they're just standard inlets that are there. There's probably 150-foot channel in between the outlet of the pipe that takes it from those inlets and puts it into Maroon Creek. So I'd have to imagine that most of the sediment is deposited in the riprap that they put in when they put that portion in.
Well, I'm not suggesting necessarily we make it a scope of the project. It seems that while we're there, we should kind of find out and see if there's opportunities to improve the water quality from the road spill.
Okay.
I know the city did a nice kind of catch area riparian vegetation for the Maroon Creek mitigation and all the parking lots at the golf course and everything, and just like to keep that in mind.
Ron?
Yes,
One more
Steve.
question on that. Rachel's comment made me think of they have an oil separator thing down here on the City of Aspen project down by the recycling center, and that if there is oil coming out of the Highlands parking lot and down across the road, perhaps an oil separator, which is like a sort of in a septic tank kind of a contraption, but then there's a way that it traps the oil before it goes down into the John Denver sanctuary down there. That might be a project, and maybe it's a healthy rivers and streams kind of project too that they could take on.
The drainage in the area that these are taking is generally just road surface drainage through here. Most of, not all of the parking areas are drains through the parking structure itself. I'm not sure where the outlets of those are or if it's just something that goes into the groundwater table, but we can take a look at that. This is a picture at Prospector. So this is the Up Valley intersection. This is just to emphasize that a lot of this concrete out here is in various states of failure. It's shifted and moved since it's been installed. Again, I think in replacing this, we're going to solve a lot of the the turning movement issues that we do have out at Aspen Highlands.
And are we replacing with concrete?
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll look much the same as it does now, minus the varying elevations and cracking. The next project kind of got sprung upon us. We were anticipating having to do this at some point in the near future, but this was not the year that we had necessarily anticipated it. This is a picture of bridge rail on the North Bridge in Redstone. So this is, a few miles down valley from Redstone proper. Yes, we were anticipating. I'm sorry, the way that these got layered on the slide didn't turn out as I intended. But what that should read is we identified this as a maintenance project. I think we looked at all of these in 2010 or 2011. We expected to do this sometime around 2015, 2016 is when we were going to address this with a bridge maintenance project. This spring has resulted in a few failures on the bridge. We're working with some structural engineers at SGM to look at what our options are for crash-tested bridge rail. Being that this is a nice-looking rural timber rail bridge, we kind of want to match that character moving forward. At this point, what we have envisioned here is bringing a few options out to the various community associations and/or the caucus out there, and seeing, all things being relatively equal price-wise, what the community would want to see as far as character on that bridge. The bridge itself, the substructure and the deck is in pretty good condition. We won't look at any sort of other treatments to the bridge other than the railing. For the short term, our Road and Bridge Department has gone out and put up some temporary pieces of wood to address any safety concerns we have in the short term. But our challenge is going to be with this bridge is if we touch it, we need to bring the railing standards up to something that's crash tested. So finding something that'll fit on the bridge that can be side mounted like this is without taking and narrowing the deck with it is going to be a little bit harder than standard. But so we anticipate probably having something to be installed up there in the fall is what our goal is.
JR, what do you mean by crash test?
There is a significant amount of money invested in the United States into finding out whether guardrail and bridge rail is crashworthy. And they have all different types of classifications to that classworthiness. And so a lot of the ratings are dependent on the type of vehicle that you want to prevent from exiting the roadway. Without getting too much into it, what we look at here is with the speed of the road in the area and the alignment with 133, what sort of considerations we need to take into effect. We're probably looking at something that's middle of the road as far as crashworthiness. We don't need to design for something that would be on I-70 at 75 mile an hour speeds with semis with 2 trailers. That's not something that's really in our context here. We'll look at something that would probably withhold a medium-sized truck from exiting the roadway, and they have all different sorts of standards of how they measure that.
Questions? On to carryover projects? Or more?
Sure. So the ABC pedestrian drainage and roadway improvement project, where we're doing widening and grade adjustments to the 200 road this year. We had a pretty significant utility partnership last year to replace a lot of the utilities on the 200 road. We have a drainage channel to construct. We've got significant landscaping to complete, and we're looking at potential minor trail work around the drainage pond that we constructed last year, and we're working with Open Space and Trails to look at all the different opportunities that we have. One of the ideas is to see if we can't cut something into the hillside that would be sustainable for a mountain biker coming off of the Rio Grande and being able to switch back up into the ABC. What you see there is a few pieces of equipment down where we installed the Stein Pond last construction season. That was probably one of the largest drainage features that the county's constructed outside of maybe anything at the airport. And to give context, you're looking down the Stein Trail and the old Stein stairs there before they were replaced. To give some context of where we're talking about, State Highway 82 would be just off of this map to the bottom side here. This is the frontage road, or the 100 road. This is the main intersection with 82 where the light is, and Roxy's is right here in this corner. The 200 road is this road that goes down and makes the 90-degree turn here. We have some minor grade adjustments to facilitate positive drainage from here down and around the corner here. There's been significant drainage issues here in this corner over the last several years, and we've talked to and worked with the landowners in that area to be able to change those grades to get the water to flow past there. Where it will go next is into a channel that is delineated here as the ABC 200 alleyway. The way that we construct this channel is it's out of concrete, and it'll look a little bit like an upside-down sidewalk in that it'll be a sidewalk with curb head up. And so when we're having a major rain event, it'll act as a drainage channel, but when we're not having that sort of event, it'll be a nice pedestrian pathway. Even if we have smaller events, the way that the grade is adjusted through there, part of it will be a nice walking surface. The other part can be submerged in water.
And good for skateboarding all the time.
Yeah. We have a lot of challenges on the ABC right now. As the contractor's mobilizing back in over the next month or so, we're installing a lot of our parking signage. We're working with a lot of the business owners in the ABC, trying to facilitate the change in the way that the parking is working out there. We, as the board may recall, along the center road here, the 300 road, we have parallel parking on one side. Then we have an on-grade pedestrian pathway that will be striped here in the next couple months, where the deputies have been working hard to tag cars to let them know that they can't park on one side of the 300 road. That's coming along in this area. Where we're having difficulties now is we just got the signs in on the 400 road, so it's going to take some time to get people into the new habit of where they can and cannot park. The area here right now is parked on pretty extensively. Actually today, before the meeting, when I drove through there, it's about as bad as it's ever been. But that being said, we only installed the signs last Friday saying no parking. But a few things have been changing in the ABC, and some property has changed hands that has taken away some of the off-street parking that was there up to a few months ago. And so back on, this is back near John's garage. The gate on the 400 road is just in the center here. Beyond that is the residential area. On this side of the picture is more of the commercial area. You've got Scott Automotive just out of frame to the left. You've got John Gunther's garage just out of frame to the right, and past that is where Columbine Moving and Storage is. We work with a lot of folks out there, and I think that we're going to be able to alleviate a lot of the problem here. But as you see here, we've got a car parallel parked, and I didn't put into this slide presentation, but extending back on the 400 road, coming around, where we're looking at here is the gate is here. Those properties are right about here. So extending down this way on the 400 road is probably one of the areas that we're seeing the worst pressure as far as a need for parking. What we did when we constructed this is we built it a bit wider to help facilitate more pedestrian movement. As we were building the project, what we realized was we narrowed that section up in design to avoid taking down a lot of landscaping islands and trees and preserve as much green space. But when we got in there and started digging around and and measured outside width of ditch to outside edge of ditch that was existing, we found that we could add more pedestrian amenity. What we're going to go back and take a look at is to see what exact widths that we have where, and see what can be facilitated moving forward, and to see what sort of latitudes that we have as far as parking plans into the future. What we'd like to do at this point, and what our proposal is to sign, as we have discussed over the many years of planning that we've gone through to get to where we are, and see after a full summer of enforcement and pressures out in the business center, to see, hey, did we get this right on the first crack, or are there tweaks that we need to make, and are there areas that we should maybe extend a little bit of parking in the business section of the 400 road, or is there other areas where maybe we should facilitate more pedestrian movement? So those are the challenges that we have on an operational basis on that project. From a construction, we couldn't be happier with the partnership that we've developed with the contractor on this project. I think we overran our rock excavation by 750%, and they worked with us on all of that accounting. It didn't end up putting us over budget. We were able to keep all of that within budget by doing a little bit of trading between quantities and working with some of our contingency that we had on the project. So all in all, I think this is an extremely, extremely successful project so far. The other thing that you heard me reference was the quote-unquote alleyway where we're going to construct a concrete channel. This is a picture from right around lunchtime of where the alleyway is going to be constructed. You've got the 400 road up here out of frame to the left. Just here on the right, that's the Holy Cross substation there. And we're building this drainage feature through an easement that we had with Holy Cross.
GR, is this one of the routes that Open Space is looking at accessing from the river? Because along that hillside and coming out through here?
Exactly. And that's why we're building that channel such that we have, I believe it's a 5-foot width of pathway that is pedestrian friendly.
There used to be power lines along there.
They're just, you can just make out the edge of the power lines right here. Is there anything else as far as the ABC pedestrian drainage and roadway improvements project?
Michael?
Why don't we just give up parking enforcement in the ABC? I mean, aren't we just pushing against a tide that's just going to overwhelm us anyway? I mean, if there were sidewalks there, we could say don't park on the sidewalk. But otherwise, why are we bothering with it? I mean, we're not providing other parking. The pressures are there. And all we're doing is using up sheriff's time and pissing people off. So what do we gain?
Public safety, fire truck, access.
We could give up on the parking in Lanedo, too.
No, you don't have to be sarcastic, Rachel. I'm posing a question that needs an answer.
I don't know if it's a safety issue. If
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean,
fire truck needs to
I
get
look
down
at the
there.
situation before we did our improvements, and I'm looking at them after we've done our improvements. And I've been out there. I know what the pressures are out there. There's not adequate parking for some reason within the structures of the buildings and stuff. So people are just parking on the road. So that's the conditions. So what do? Do we do enforcement? Do we get people off? I mean, the minute we don't have enforcement, people are going to park on the road. So I don't quite understand why we're doing it.
Rob, I'm wondering if GR might be able to comment, because it seems like a starting point is, what are the available widths, and if those are adequate, then it's really a policy question versus a public safety kind of question.
That could be. I mean, but the idea of turning back a pressure that that we're not giving any outlet for. I mean, we haven't, in this project, we didn't provide any other parking. There's businesses out there galore. I don't know. I just don't know what the deal is.
Yeah, and I just wanted to give you guys some facts to work with if we have them at the table.
Facts to
That's a
work
good
with.
question. Well, if we have them.
Rachel?
You know, I could be mistaken, but I thought that a lot of this had to do with the work that Cindy and ComDev did with the ABC residents about how they want to see the ABC develop in the future. And so it's really become that mix of residential neighborhood and housing dispersed throughout the whole area compared to what used to have been the industrial zone. I mean, I'm kind of open to taking a look at it too, Michael, but, you know, there's a point at which, you know, Aspen didn't have enough parking. And you know, it continues in some people's minds to not have enough parking. And you do transportation demand management, you do paid parking. And you start to radically cut and change habits. And I would agree with you that, you know, just parking enforcement and tickets is not necessarily a pleasant thing because there's no alternatives being offered. But when you consider the millions and millions of dollars that we as a community are now putting into the bus rapid transit system to support that program, the stops, the underpass at the business center, you know, at what point are you saying, here, please ride the bus, that's what we're trying to do, folks, and by the way, it's free parking over here, so please drive anytime you want, we'll accommodate you, we'll keep making more parking for you. And so at what point is there alignment of the two goals? And I don't know that that's possible or not. Certainly some of these are service industries and you're going to be coming and going with your truck and picking it up, or repairs or things like that. Others are office jobs and you're going to be in an office all day long. And do you need your car? Are we encouraging people to use RAFTA? We just throw it out there and say maybe? Or are we, you know, going to continue to encourage single occupant vehicle cars? And if you want to get serious about parking, at some level, you start to charge for the asset. You know, even in the town here, when different areas have said, oh, we need a loading zone out front, they pay the city for having a loading zone instead of 3 parking spaces because they've taken that away. If this is really becoming, you know, a subsidy to specific businesses by providing free space, I think there's a lot of different county assets. People say, hey, can I use that for free because it will help me run my business. But anyhow, the ComDev, I'd like to look at the ComDev plans.
I just don't know, and rather than tie it to BRT and our mass transit and all that, it seems to me that there's a limited amount of parking out there. It's gone over that limit. People are parking in the street. And there will be a limit to that also.
Yeah.
But to ask us to ticket people, I'm not sure that's the best route to go. And if it becomes unworkable out there, then the people who own property and have to participate in a solution. But for us to go and say, ticketing, we're going to solve this by ticketing, seems counterproductive. Counterproductive in terms of building community, and counterproductive in parking itself, because people would just risk a ticket. That's just the nature of people. So nothing gets solved that way. We've just involved the sheriff's department in enforcement that he doesn't have time for. So I don't know what the solution is, but I can't believe that ticketing is the solution.
I think at this point with GR's presentation, it needs further discussion if we want to have further discussion on this, as opposed to putting it directly on this discussion. You know, because there are a lot of different concerns which can't be addressed here. The fire department, safety issues,
Snow plowing,
habits changing and how they do or don't change when policy decisions are made of ticketing. I mean, if you don't ticket, you get 20 more cars out there, and then is it really unsafe if someone needs to go to the hospital, or you need an ambulance, or you need to turn a fire? So I would suggest that maybe I'll make a note in open discussion to say whether or not we want to discuss this in a further work session.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but back to Rachel's point, ComDev and GR did extensive public hearings out at the AABC to look at the overall master plan, so it'd be good to bring that in for us to review that and see where those comments were and what the direction was from the business owners and the residents out there.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do a further work session on this one topic and make it more thorough.
So let's just decide on that now, John, if you want to just put it in your notes to think about a work session on the parking situation throughout the entire AABC as it relates to our road program.
One other thing that might be happening is, there's pressure of people parking in ABC who are going to the airport, and whether any of them are down on 400 Road, I don't know, but it'd be worth investigating that too.
Yeah, that'd be worth
We can
looking
bring
at.
all of that back.
It's up to you, Rob, but you have a citizen.
Yeah, I think we said we're going to bring it back in some other discussion.
Okay.
Is there more to your presentation?
On this project, no.
On the next project, we have 3 minutes.
Okay, I drank plenty of caffeine this morning. On the ABC Airport Pedestrian Crossing Project, we are at a point in the project where the contractor has remobilized in a majority of their staff. We're looking at final grading, landscaping, staining a lot of the concrete that's been placed, site cleanup, and median replacement as our remaining items of work. The last bullet there is probably the most significant as far as impact to the public. The median replacements on State Highway 82, there'll be various lane closures to get that work done. The contractor will have to work within the lane closure rules that CDOT has for the highway as to reduce the impact to the traveling public. So basically they can't close a lane going up valley until after 9 a.m. or they have to have the down valley center lane open by 3 p.m. for people heading home.
Is there a time of year? Can they get this done in May as opposed to July?
Mm-hmm. So the last milestone on the contract that's coming up is May 15th. And what we're anticipating is we're moving some of the landscaping items to after that date because, frankly, we'd be shooting ourselves in the foot with some of these items to have them done that early in the growing season. But that being said, we expect them, so long as they can herd all of the subcontractors that they're getting in for this type of work, that will be done on that May 15th date. We'll have some punch list stuff. We'll have some landscaping stuff that spills up till June 1st. But that being said, it looks like they're set up at this point to get that done. This is a picture of the front of the pedestrian box on the ABC side. And this is on the airport side where they're starting to do some of the final grading. I took this picture at lunchtime as well today, just so everyone can get a kind of an idea of where we're at real time. And we've placed a lot of these landscaping boulders. I believe all of them have come out of the project, so we didn't have to import anything. So this area is going to get topsoiled and seeded for grasses and I believe sage.
Why does the grade of the underpass slope down going towards the airport versus being level?
Well, there's a couple different factors. One is the grade and the cross-section of the highway. The cross-section of the highway isn't a traditional crown through here. It goes from a crown up into a super elevated as you make, if you're going up valley, you've got a big sweeping right turn. And so the airport side of the highway, I believe, is a bit lower than the APC side. And then the other thing is when we consider those grades, you have to drain it one way or the other. And so if we were to drain it towards the ABC, we didn't have enough cover over the end of the pedestrian box to facilitate that drainage. So now it has to get tilted the other way. And so that gives us that amount of cover that we want on both sides of the highway.
I'm still a little bit concerned with the truncating of the sidewalk where the old pedestrian crossing was. It seems to me there's been just some, caution tape out there with some stuff that a lot of it during the snow, which is mostly gone at this point, packed it down and stuff like that. And I have seen some tracks where people have walked that way. So I'm a little concerned with that and how it connects to the airport paths, because there's still a path that goes that way until you get to that, whatever it is, caution tape, and then you've got to go kind of down the road to where the next crossing is. And I just hope some of that gets rectified before summertime, I guess, at this point.
It's in our scope of work, and it's actually in the scope of work of two different contractors.
Yeah.
The striping will be done this spring. We're working with the staff at the airport to figure out the best way to facilitate the movement from the airport to the underpass. We're going to move the striping to the crosswalk that you were talking about, where the pathway comes from the underpass comes out to Airport Road. And then we're going to remove the striping that's at the intersection. What we've talked about is possibly blocking off from the airport side some of those pathways that come out to the road and redirecting that traffic down through the rental car lot. And so those are the things that we're planning on doing to mitigate people coming out of the bung.
In terms of landscaping, whether it be a bush or a rock or something that really says, this is not an appropriate place to cross.
And what we're also looking at is the addition eventually of a small lamp at that intersection of the trail and the roadway,
Yeah.
to kind of delineate that this is exactly where you need to be.
Other questions about this project?
Just
Steve?
just a comment, I go by it every time coming to town, and it really is looking sharp. The work that's been done already is making it look finished, or close to finished.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
It's very exciting for us that are on the project staff for that.
Anything else?
I believe that's all that I had today.
Great. GR, thank you.
Thank you.
We're now scheduled for a 15-minute break. Let's call it a 12-minute break because we're a little behind schedule. And we've got an interview at 3:15.
Okay, thank you.
Someone's going to have to tell me how to pronounce that last name.
Overlander.
Overlander?
Overrinder.
Rinder.
Yeah, like the city's old water director was Phil Overrinder, her husband.
So it's like a double R. Overrinder? Overrinder?
Yeah, Phil Overrinder.
So you pronounce the R twice. That's the one that's how I couldn't get it.
John, should I shut this down?
Why don't you keep it up just in case somebody
There's an unused one.
turn off at the end of the day. Thanks, GR. Good job.
GR, notice our budget seems like you're taking...
insurance program, and I have Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, so anybody on Anthem, well, actually, I wasn't even 60 when I qualified for that, but it's supposed to be for seniors, so Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield supports it, so if you have insurance. So that was very good, and just all the different things they get involved with. And I was part of the regional advisory committee, the RAC, and traveled around to some of the other senior citizen centers, and that was very interesting. And then I was on the Aging Well Forum just this past year, and I was involved with writing up goals for technology, bringing technology to seniors, and that's something that I was involved with as part of the Senior Council, helping to come up with programs to help seniors bridge the gap. And I mean, I'm one of those people wanting to bridge the gap, and I have some skills, but it was very good working with Mary Barber and some of the other people that say, well, what do these seniors need? And how different people stepped up, like Barbara Bloomsma and some of the other members started the Circle of Friends, and that brings in high school students to help. And then I happened to be up there one day when the Circle of Friends was up there. It was kids from the high school, and they sat down and went through my iPad with me and all the different things that I had questions about. So that was great. And I actually learned Skype because the person who I lined up to come volunteer decided that she didn't want to volunteer, she wanted to be paid. And so Patty Kravitz and I said, well, we're going to learn Skype. And we learned Skype, and then we taught the class. And so now there are all kinds of classes coming on for technology. So that one I was involved with, that issue. And then the other goal I wrote up for the Aging Well was the facility of the actual senior center, how it is just too small to accommodate all the needs that there are now. If you go up there in the morning and you see their fitness classes, and there's just not enough room up there for those. And I'm in the book club up there, and so I'm in the book club, so we're sitting in one area, and then there's some other group talking in the other area, and somebody's doing puzzles. It's very small, and it can be very distracting. Or I frequently go up for the after lunch sessions, like they might have a technology session, or they had something on brain health the other day, and we're all crammed in this little room, and it's very confining. And I sure would like the county commissioners to actually, or the senior council, to get involved in looking at the possibility down the road of having a bigger senior center or an expanded senior center. And I understand the city is doing an assets management plan, or I think they're involved in it right now. And once I get back, if I get back on the senior council, I would like to, maybe with their blessing, at least talk to somebody, the asset manager, to say, what does the city have that might be possible for an expanded senior center somewhere down the line, so you can at least get in a planning phase.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Steve?
I was visiting with Debbie a little bit at the senior luncheon today, so we were kind of kidding around. And I decided I should ask her what she's going to do in her retirement. Of course, she's already retired and spends her time help on senior issues, and that help is very much appreciated. So I don't really have any additional questions for you, Debbie, but...
I also have Kathy Clues with the service squad at Aspen High School. And so we do a variety of things up there, some of them with the high school, some with the seniors. And I also volunteer with the Historic Society at the Mining and Ranching Museum in the summer.
But we did miss your input and your presence during the past year at the senior council meetings. And that is a kind of a quirk of the Senior Services Council, is that there's these mandatory one-year sabbaticals after 2 terms. And
I think that's good.
so
I think
I would
we
look
need a year
forward
off.
to having you back on the council.
Other questions?
You can only say
I'll
thank
ask
you.
one. Is everybody tweeting up at the senior center?
I'm not.
Um,
Emailing, certainly.
I am curious what you think. I mean, you mentioned some about the size of the facilities, but in general in our Valley, what are some of the challenges that seniors are facing today?
Well, I am frankly shocked at the number of people that appear to me to be coming in low income. And what they are workers, a number of which come in with their, they've been they've probably been working in the skiing industry, or maybe they're bartenders and working class people who are now retiring here, and they don't have any money, and I can't see how they're going to survive, or if they are, they're living with not a lot of money, and I guess a lot of them come up to the senior center for lunch because it's a place to come for where if you don't have any money, you don't. Nobody's going to question you if you don't pay. You're supposed to pay, but I'm very surprised about that. And I do know that more and more people are retiring. People who own second homes here, now they retire here, and so more people are coming in with more demands for services. And Marty and Patty and I was on a rural outreach committee. They've done a lot for trying to get resources and information to the people in Meredith and Redstone, and that's been very good. And some of the stories you hear about going up there and finding these people, and they live out on ranches and rural Pitkin County. Single women living alone on a ranch. And it's going to be real interesting as it develops. And I do know one person who I moved to Glenwood Springs because the rent was less there, but he still comes up. I see him at the senior center a couple times a week. He still feels a part of Aspen, and so he still comes up. And I understand that because I was so disappointed when we didn't get the community care retirement center here up the Moore property. I was just really disappointed because I saw that as a place for myself to go when I get to that point. But so I think it's going to be a big challenge for a lot of these people who retire and stay here, and also the whole housing situation. And one woman said she's going to have to work till she's 90 in order to pay for her housing payment, and she's in affordable housing.
It's going to be tough. Well, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Generally, we take a little time to make our decision and that sort of stuff and get back to you.
Okay.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is our memos of interest, starting with Chris. Is that what we're going to start with?
Yeah,
John?
so the first MOI is a request for sponsorship of the 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act, and we have our requesters at the table.
Good afternoon.
Great. Take it away. Just state for the TV cameras your name for the record and that stuff.
I'm Chris Lane with the Aspen Center for Environmental Studies.
Sloan Shoemaker Wilderness Workshop, and it's a pleasure to be back in front of you guys again. It's been a while. We, as you are aware, this is the 50th anniversary of the passage of the Wilderness Act, passed in 1964. And in that original Wilderness Act was the designation of the first component of the Maroon Belt Snowmass Wilderness Area. So not only is the Wilderness Act 50 years old, but so is the Snowmass Maroon Belt Wilderness Area, Maroon Belt Snowmass Wilderness Area. And we're collaborating with ACES and the White River National Forest to celebrate both the 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act and the Maroon Belt Snowmass Wilderness Area birthday with a series of events this year. But sort of the keystone event is going to be a party, but an educational party, or a party with an educational component on August 2nd, and it's going to be at the base of Aspen Highlands, and we've been working with the Metro District there and going through the permitting process and the local vendors to make sure they're all cool with it, and they're so far so good. And the idea is let's just let's just have a celebration of our common wilderness heritage, something that is defining to this community, that the values of this community so embraces, is this living adjacent to this incredible gift that the Wilderness Act brought us, of this pristine landscape from which flows clean air and clean water and bountiful recreational opportunities and bountiful wildlife, and so we want to celebrate that, and we want to celebrate it in a way that is motherhood and apple pie. You know, it's all about existing wilderness, not about potential new wilderness, which could, entrain some conflict in there. We don't want to do that. It's all about let's just join hands and celebrate what we have that we derive so much from. The notion is that certainly we want to celebrate 50 years of wilderness, but we also want to think about the next 50 years of wilderness as well. And so the idea is that this celebration, this party, which is going to be several bands and some inspirational speakers, and we're working with the First Nations, the Utes, to come as well to help us open it up with some convocation. The notion is that the party alone is going to be fun enough to bring in people who might not normally engage in this concept of environmental education or wilderness education or even understand what wilderness is. And that they will come for that, and then in the process they'll be exposed to what a wilderness ethos is and what this foundation of wilderness that surrounds us is all about. And so we'll have this educational component with booths around the lawn where the audience will be, with multiple bands to be exciting and fun, and a really exciting component of this is that we're going to working with ACES and the Caddo leadership dialogues. We're bringing in noted author Rick Bass to kick it off with a wilderness themed presentation and talk, which is part of this foundational educational component and then we'll have, again, like I said, the Utes will be part of this, so that we'll get a perspective of sort of a pre-pioneering settlement perspective on what wilderness is, and then there'll be other multiple educational opportunities part of that. So we're here to ask the county if you would be willing to help support this through a gift or a sponsorship to the effort. Right now, the Wilderness Workshop, ACES and White River National Forest are pitching in $5,000, and the goal is to make this as accessible at all as it can be, and reduce the barriers that would prevent people from coming. In other words, the cost of a ticket. And so the more support, more sponsorship, more donors that we're able to recruit on the front end, the cheaper the ticket price and the more inclusive the event can be. And that's why your support and the support that we got from the city of Aspen last week for $2,500, with an option to come back for more if we were able to demonstrate we can get the ticket price down even further, it was left available to us. So that's my kickoff. Chris, you want to?
I don't have anything else to add. I think you said it all, other than, Scott Fitzwilliams, if he was here, he's unable to make it today, is enthusiastically supportive. The Forest Service is doing these events around the country, and this is, we're arguably surrounded by more wilderness than maybe any town in the country, in the continental U.S. This is our event. So this is, they're day-long, unrelated to this funding request and unrelated to the evening event, are day-long events that will be going on with numerous nonprofits. ACES in particular is holding a youth event, 50 leaders, young leaders, hand-selected in the Valley to address the issue of wilderness, and they'll be attending this event in the evening. So there's all kinds of events like that going on all day, and I just would leave you with this thought, that if you don't live to 100, this is a once-in-a-lifetime.
It's true.
Questions? George.
For John, so we have the ability to support something like this, either or through our discretionary fund, and we also have a special projects fund. We have money set aside.
Yeah, so there's three ways you could fund this. The board has a discretionary fund. We put $10,000 in that each year. Obviously, this would use half of that. The others, we have a strategic initiatives fund. That is up for carryover tomorrow. On tomorrow's agenda from 2013, we didn't add new dollars, but we didn't spend, and we have $85,000, just north of $85,000 in that. And then your third option, although I don't think it'd be necessary, would be to do a separate appropriation for it. So you have options if you wanted to fund it.
Rachel?
Let me ask, how are you guys going to promote the event outside of the valley? Or are you going to just promote it within the valley?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, one way to do that is looking at making it feel a little bit like a festival and having maybe up to 4 bands, a couple of the small bands and a couple of bigger bands, and that in theory might draw people from the Denver area. We'll do all the classic other marketing approaches, social media and typical marketing campaigns that we'd put in the Denver market for sure. That's one of our hopes, and is to get people to come from Denver for this. I mean, the Maroon Bells, I think, icon itself speaks to America, not just this valley, so we think we will get people outside the valley, we believe.
And I wasn't even necessarily thinking of Denver as much as Grand Junction, and I know a lot of those folks come up for activities up here and things like that as well.
Right.
I think it'd be a nice introduction to our valley and to Wilderness Values for those who really don't live here to see this type of event and come for this type of event. And I'd like to find a way to support it, and I'm open to discussing the range if we want to try to do the full amount or something less. But it is a defining characteristic of Pickens County, and it's something that I think in its own way is our bread and butter as much as the ski industry is.
George?
Sloan, do you expect or are inviting anyone from, any folks from the Wilderness Society to come out from BC, or some of the people that you interact with and we interact with?
I know that the Wilderness Society themselves are participating in studies of events across the country. They have an office in Denver. I really haven't even thought about that yet, but that's a great idea, and it would be great if we could get the president of the Wilderness Society to come out and even have one. We've got there's 15 minutes of band changeover set breaks, and so we plan to use those 3 intervals for these educational segments, and so that would be a great opportunity to shoehorn in some of the Wilderness Society. But I haven't thought about that. If you have...
And I'll chime in that one reason he may not have thought about it is we've been focusing on the notion of trying to reach the audience we haven't reached before. That getting people that maybe don't know as much about wilderness, but might be attracted to a band. Getting, one of our goals is if you're a youth that attends the event, and there'll be early in the evening more family style events, things that kids can do. I hope you leave the event knowing something about wilderness, not just I came and ate and drank and listened to a band. So that's one of our goals, and not preaching to the choir is one of our goals. So I think it'll be easy to pull in your contacts, our contacts, the usual suspects of who attend these types of events, but our focus is a little outside that.
Steve?
First of all, just a small disclaimer, I used to be the president of the Aspen Wilderness Workshop. At the same time when the 1984 Wilderness Act was being conjured upon, and I was out in the field determining where would be a good boundary in the Capitol Creek and East Cypress Creek area, which to a large extent that was what became the wilderness boundary, where I drew a line on the map. I've lived here since before there was any wilderness area. We moved here in 1961, and our ranch adjoins has common boundary with the Forest Service land, some of which was added in the 1984 Wilderness Act. So I've gotten to see it clear from when there was no wilderness to when there was the smaller Maroon Bells Snowmass Wilderness to when there's the expanded one, and then a lot lot more other wilderness areas also, and it's really pretty astounding to me that we have so much wilderness, designated wilderness in Pitkin County, and how it has changed kind of what Pitkin County is. We have some of, the really the premier wilderness areas in the whole United States right here. And I personally would support funding the whole thing. I do play for a band, and we're used to getting paid maybe gas money to get there. And then when I see you're paying a band $10,000 or a couple bands $5,000 each, and it made me curious, what bands are you talking about bringing in? Or do you have somebody lined up already?
Well, I'll answer one part. One part, we do have a revised budget. I brought it if you wanted to see it. We've upped the band allocation. And two is, I don't know all the bands. I only know one name of the,
Yeah.
you might know them better than I would.
Well, so that budget was a very preliminary budget. We thought that we could find some big headliner for $10,000 that would just open the floodgates and would pack the venue. Turns out that they're a lot more expensive than that. So we have to parse the money out a little more broadly. And so the notion is to start with a local bluegrass band. Do you know any? And that that we'll pay the going rate for. And then we've got Holden Walford and the High Beams, who played Wildfest a couple of years ago from Boulder, who was a pretty good draw for us then. And then there's two younger bands that were open. It's going to appeal to this 20, 30 something age group. The one's called the Shook Twins, a couple of gals in their band out of California, and then the Wheeler Brothers out of Texas. And it's all kind of in the same genre of bluegrass bass, but some rock and some folk influences and that kind of thing. So it'll be more up tempo as the night progresses.
George?
Well, this is Pitkin County. And I agree, we should be celebrating this great event. That's one thing we don't do enough of, a celebration. And surrounded by 3 wilderness areas, Pitkin County is certainly the iconic Snowmass Maroon Bells area. And to add to that, an educational component to try to encourage and teach the next generation the importance of wilderness, the importance of protecting some of these special places in our environment as we look forward towards the challenges of climate change, I think is a critical component of this celebration. So I would support the request for $5,000. I think we have ample money in our strategic initiatives. It's not going to impact us in any way. And I think it's great that we put our best foot forward and say, this is a celebration, that Pitkin County is behind it all the way. We want to work with you any way we can to promote this and make this as successful as we can.
Rachel?
I really hesitate just because we so rarely go much more than $500 on events, or refunding someone's special event permit fee. But this is, at least for me, a once-in-a-lifetime event. And I think it really could be well worth the expenditure. I think you'll need to talk to RAFTA to make sure we really have some extra service that day, because there's obviously not a lot of parking up at Highlands. Considering they do the Maroon Bells buses in the summer, maybe they'll help you out with that, that way, but that's going to be critical. And then, I think it'd be, we just came from our retreat, we were talking a little about economic sustainability and things like that. Not to try to parlay this event into something like that, but I'd love to see you guys make sure that like editors of Outside Magazine and some of these larger companies that whole trade is selling equipment to use in wilderness areas. It'd be great. You could even maybe talk to Debbie Braun at the Chamber of Commerce to say, can you think of any avenues to get this word out about this great event? Because if there were some follow-up stories of people who are naturally inclined to celebrate wilderness and those values, and They did a one-pager on how, fun it was to go to Pickens County and what a mecca this is with the 3 wilderness areas surrounding the town. And just, I'd see what you could do to play it for all it's worth, since you're going through all the effort of organizing it. But I could really see, trying to invite, whether they show up or not, that they get the invitation to the head of REI and to, some of these companies, and, could long-term help your organizations as you find future contributors. But I just use it that way as well.
I really like what you're saying, because when people think of Aspen, I think they tend to think of the skiing, right? But marketing Aspen as, we're a wilderness town. We're a town surrounded by this pristineness. I mean, not that it's a new spin, but you just don't hear it that often.
Well, and you just don't have events that are landmark enough to really highlight that. I'm sure the Chamber talks about it all the time, but I just think you really could develop a list to try to, get to these people who are the ones who do the mountain biking magazines, well, although mountain bikes can't go. Sorry about that. But, the hiking, camping, all that type of thing. I just think there's a lot of people who'd be interested.
I have a few questions. One, first I'll say I think we should support this in some fashion. We have had several event-type organizations come before us. This is unique, and it's very special about Pickens County. It is about our economic sustainability. And, as you know, the Acra Luncheon, if you watch the video this morning, it's all about being in the outdoors and partaking in the glory that we've got around us, that we've preserved and we've protected. And it does, and I agree with George 100%, that it does deserve the celebration part of Pickens County, which we don't often do. Talking to John after that meeting this morning, we're putting out fires all the time in Pickens County. It'd be nice to spend some money to celebrate something. But some of my questions, one, I don't know how your budget's changed or what your plan is for your full budget, which would also include the revenue side. Who are the other people that are putting in money, and how do you plan on raising $43,000, or is this going to be subsidized by ACES and Wilderness Workshop if it doesn't meet that? I've run several events like this over 20, 30 years of being in the hospitality side of things, and often they lose money unless you've got an angel sponsor. So I'm curious a little bit of how you're trying to meet. I mean, even with the $25 a head entrance, and it also relates to another question I wrote down. What's the capacity for this? I'm not sure what the capacity is for that Highlands Mall area or that sort of thing. I mean, 1,000 people, that sort of thing.
Probably several thousand people. We haven't fenced it off yet. The goal is, we'd be happy if we got 1,000 people there, but I think if the area is big enough, 1,000 people will disappear in there pretty easily, and so 2,000, 3,000 people, maybe that's possible to fit in that area. And we're talking about the grassy area, not actually on the developed concrete portion. So base of the lift and up the gentle incline at the bottom of the slope. But you want to address the?
Well, so you've got the income on this sheet, which I haven't seen. So
yeah, this is a revised budget. I mean, the angels are the Forest Service, Wilderness Workshop, ACES, and if you guys approve it, you guys and the city. So I mean, those are the angels. That's our foundational money that's going to start the engine and make everything happen. We're looking at corporate sponsors as well, and we're not looking at our. This event is not about ACES and Wilderness Workshop and the Forest Service.
Self-promoting.
Self-promoting, yeah. So it's all about wilderness, and I think, Rachel, you bring up a great idea to not only use it as a communication tool with the outdoor industry, but maybe there's funding there as well. So between these organizations and ticket sales and other sponsorships, we're working with sponsors on food and sponsors on drink and the bands, where we've got those bands nailed down, but we're also still looking at the angel band that might appear, a Bonnie Raitt type. I don't think we'll get someone that big, but someone who cares about the environment and might do something like that at the last minute. So we're doing our traditional routes.
My next question is, why August 2nd, just out of curiosity?
I think it was a date that wasn't booked yet.
And all the events.
There's got to be something going on in Aspen August 2nd.
I couldn't think of a conflict.
Well, we looked to the
but-
calendar and it didn't,
Yeah.
and no immediate conflict popped up.
And that is the month for the celebration. I mean, that's where all the other events around the
Yeah.
country are
The
going
town's
on.
packed, yeah, and that's a date that's really important for the Forest Service because they're coordinating events throughout the White River National Forest in each of the ranger districts, and Summit and Eagle and Holy Cross and Aspen Cyclist, Rifle and the Rio Blanco up in the northwest, and they calendared all those events so they weren't overlapping and competing with each other, and the window August 2-3 was what they calendared for this ranger district, and so we jumped on it. Unfortunately, it wasn't a conflict with the social calendar otherwise.
And the ski company has committed to using the Besa Highlands for that date?
It's not managed by the ski company. It's private, so it's part of the Highlands Metro District. And so we've been talking to the Metro District about that. They're fine. They just have an application process. They welcome the energy in the business.
Yeah.
And the Highlands Ale House is going to be the food and beverage vendor there because for obvious reasons it's right there and they've got the capacity. They've got a big commercial kitchen downstairs and they could supply enough food and beer for this size of crowd.
Steve?
Where do you see the bulk of the parking being? Are you going to use the buttermilk and then do shuttles like the winter skiing?
Yes.
Is that the plan?
I don't know. There isn't a
Or
plan.
have you-
Yeah,
have you thought about it?
We haven't figured the parking out yet, but
Yeah.
we certainly anticipate massive bus use. I mean, there will be alcohol involved as the evening goes on, so we're anticipating we would approach it just like a ski day, like the ski company does, to get as few people as possible to park, as many people as possible to take rafting.
Right, or bike.
I mean, that's one reason that site was selected is A, it's the entrance to the wilderness. It's the closest we're going to get to wilderness without being in it, where you can actually throw a party, and B, for the transit-related issues.
It's really the best of both worlds. I think. But we really haven't thought that through yet, but you're absolutely right. That's the way to go, is just utilize the system that's in place already.
We're thinking eight-person HOV. I'm teasing.
Have you talked to RAFTA to vet that $1,500 number on your expense
No,
line?
not yet.
'Cause that's,
We actually may have. I can't remember.
We haven't, but
Yeah.
on our staff, we've
Workshop
got people that are working on it, yeah.
Rob,
yes.
I gotta say, I'm not as keen on this as everybody is here. I understand and I support wilderness in every way, everybody does, but the difficulty is sitting in this seat. You get solicited a lot. And as been referenced here, we refund an application for a special event. But the minute we give $5,000 for a celebration, there are many worthwhile celebrations. Lots of them. And people are going to say, well, you gave $5,000 to Wilderness Workshop for a wilderness celebration for a party. And I'd like $5,000 to help hungry children in Pick and Eagle and Garfield County. It's a very difficult decision because you're setting a precedent for a large donation and I think we're gushing here about wilderness and the anniversary, but I think if we donate $5,000, we're setting ourselves up for that kind of request in the future, which we'll have to turn down because we don't. Picken County isn't unlimited $5,000 donations. So I'm perfectly willing to match the city of Aspen, but I think we have to be careful here in our enthusiasm. And I have enthusiasm for wilderness. I have enthusiasm for ACES and for Wilderness Workshop, for our youth. But I don't have $5,000 worth of enthusiasm.
Rachel?
Well, Michael, you're right that we will need to stand on the precedent and be able to say why we considered it uniquely different. And I do consider it uniquely different. If this was something these guys are saying, we're starting an annual event and we just need your money to help kick off an annual event, we wouldn't be talking. It's a different thing. It's a one-time type of event. It coordinates with national events. And, we faced a similar challenge when we gave a very large contribution, I can't remember, with 50, 75,000 to the thrift shop to complete its construction when they were running short. And that's something that services our community every day. There's no apples to oranges here, apples to apples. But we haven't been besieged with large requests since then for other organizations' capital drives. I think people understood that it was a single and unique sort of one-off. And so, while I appreciate the kind of heads up on the, muck we might be getting into, on the other hand, I still think this is worth it. And, if you can't say no when you're at the table here, you shouldn't be at the table. You end up with times to say yes and times to say no. So I'm supportive of this.
John, I have a question for you. I know you mentioned a few outlets of possible funding for this. Are there other outlets, if we've got more creative and it wasn't a sponsorship, it was a marketing outlet for, say, open space and trails, to have a booth there or something like that to give us, there are probably lots of ways that we would like to participate and find it from other budget sources, which would leave our discretionary fund a little bit more intact when people from other events come and present to us.
George's motion was to use it from the strategic initiatives, not our discretionary fund,
Okay.
which has $85,000 in it.
Yeah, and Rob, I think we'd have to look at whether we really could, whether this would meet the purpose of those other funding sources that were uniquely approved and for which the board has less discretion to use. At this amount of funding, I think, to be honest, I think the board needs to decide what it feels comfortable with funding and go ahead and make that appropriation, whether it's at a lower level or higher level. There are funds available for you to appropriate. It's really more of a policy decision about what you're comfortable with. If we were to go and ask Healthy Rivers and Streams or Open Space and Trails, you need to get consent or recommendation of those bodies.
I will admit I'm somewhat on the same boat as Michael in terms of the full amount and the requests that we get before us. It's something that I'd like to support, and I'm really more of the level where the city has gone in.
What I heard you say, and perhaps we could be the incentive for the city to come back, or for you to be able to come back to the city for the additional $2,500, because I thought I heard you say that they're committed to $2,500, and if there's a way to bring the cost of the participants down, then they would be up for, I don't know if it was another $2,500, but if that's the case, with the county contributing $5,000, which would help bring that individual participants' ticket price down, we could use that as an incentive for the city to match the county. Certainly, what we've heard from our surveys, community surveys, what we heard at our recent retreat with our panel members, everyone stressed that one of the reasons why this is such a great place to live, the quality of life, and the opportunities we have here is because of our outdoor access and the recreational opportunities. So that speaks not only to the county's goals, but also the city. And have you talked to Town of Snowmass Village as well?
Not yet.
So I would, again, they're an integral part of the community as well. So I think with the county showing the importance and the enthusiasm of this, I think you can leverage our dollars to bring in some additional money from the municipalities who also understand and appreciate what a great asset we have here. So that's why I would support the $5,000. And in terms of setting a precedent, I understand that there are a lot of needs in the community, but I think a lot of those needs are met through our Healthy Community Fund. And if they're not met in particular, then we always utilize our discretionary fund to help fill in any remaining gaps. So I don't see us setting a dangerous precedent of this at all.
If I may?
Yeah, go ahead, Stan.
So the city sent us over the challenge. So they said, get your ticket price down. Let's come back, rework your budget, get your ticket price down so you're more inclusive, and come back to us and we'll consider making an additional contribution. And so that's exactly in line with what you're saying, George, is if we can find more sponsorship that gets that ticket price down, it's an incentive for the city to revisit their options. Anything out of that?
No, that's dead on.
Rachel?
Yeah, again, I just see it as a one-time, but I was just going to say, I'd make sure whether they can attend or not, you get an invitation out to Sally Jewell in the Department of Interior, and, those sort of folks, and because this is a really big statement about our valley's love, appreciation, and care for the land, and that's something that, we're trying to demonstrate in other areas of the valley where we have a lot of issues with these different departments, and it's nice to be able to invite them to something that's a celebration.
Who's that other local Colorado fella? Salazar?
Salazar.
Ken Salazar.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
our former Secretary of Interior would certainly be worth inviting.
Yeah, anyway.
Well, I mean, the thing that's going through my head is, someone like Alex with Startup Day who's recently come to us with another proposal via emails, and that's the economic, prosperous economy here in that part of our agenda. And yes, I see this being a strong thing, but what argument do we have to the next presenter to say your thing isn't a strong thing or important to our community?
Yeah, Alex is saying, and to be clear, I'm glad you brought that up, because he emailed me information about it back in, December, and he waited till after the event happened, because when he first talked to us, we said, well, give us more about the budget and this and that, and it was too close. So he gave us it through me, and I forwarded on to management to say, this is how many people attended, this is how much money they were short, this is what happened there. And I thought we were going to get it on our agenda for future discussion about whether we should allocate something or not. And then I got one again from about a month ago, like, you guys doing anything? I don't think it was about a new proposal. I think he's still trying to get a grant from the last one, but we haven't even brought that to the table.
I think he's lining up for
Yeah.
the next one.
Okay.
I think he's lining up for...
But separate from that, that was a paid event. Participants were paying money in a big way to go to that. It was like $100 a person or something. It was, because I know at least one person who went, and it wasn't, a big open...
I don't even know what we're talking about.
The guy who did the business startup weekend over at the campus of the music festival.
Yeah, well, this is a totally different.
Again, you say no to some things, you say yes to others, and just because you fund one thing doesn't mean you have to fund all things.
Steve?
I see us supporting the Pro Bicycle Tour, and we've supported bringing in airline flights for a whole year, different things to promote, kind of promote tourism here. And I think we would probably be shocked if we would see the numbers, the economic benefit of the wilderness areas we have in the county is probably way more than any of us imagine. And to me, this is kind of a way of, promoting Pitt County and one aspect of our tourism, which a lot of people in the summertime come here because they want to see maroon bills. We found that out last, when the Forest Service shut things down last year. So to me, it's, it's kind of like putting money into, promoting Pitt County and our economic sustainability.
And I agree 100%. And 2 years ago in our retreat, when we started talking about special events and the money we put in, there was a lot of debate at the board at that time as to what our policy was for promoting those things and what our policy was for expending dollars that way. And I totally support the celebration of this in some form and capacity in the wilderness environment that we have for all of the economics here in this community. No question in my mind. And I was actually on the side saying Picken County should have some role in this. And from that, we allocated $50,000 as a thing in our budget that would mostly go towards things like the X Games or the bike race, towards in-kind services, which is really the sheriff's department more than anything else. But that was the level of tolerance of the board. Now we're talking, an additional of about 10% of that out of different budgetary aspects, but 10% is a big chunk, and I'm happy to go in that policy direction to some extent, but I'd like to have the full conversation of going in that policy direction versus, looking at one applicant.
And I guess I don't see this as a promotional event.
Yeah.
This is a celebration. It's celebrating something that's very, very unique. Wilderness, the idea of wilderness, the idea of national parks is such an American concept that people around the world come here to visit our great national parks, to see our wilderness, because they're just astounded that our forefathers had the foresight to set aside land specifically to protect them. And so this is a celebration for I think, for all of us. I don't see this as a promotion. If anything, it's an educational opportunity, and we certainly, I think, view that as different. So, I'm hearing 3 of us are supporting this. We're probably not going to get a unanimous in terms of the dollars, but at some point, I think we have a majority of the board to support this.
Steve, $5,000.
Yeah, I'd go for
George, $5,000. Rachel, $5,000. There you have it.
Okay, and out of strategic initiative funds.
Thanks.
Thank you, and
Just
we
have a
won't
great
let you
event.
down. This is going to be great.
Appreciate your work on it.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. very
Go
much.
chase down the city and town of Snowmass Village.
We will.
We will.
We will.
And make sure you get your
And
special event
business
permits
sponsors,
in
too.
early.
Yeah.
So we have enough time to review the traffic plan.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cindy, you're up next.
I can't wait.
Oh, yeah, right.
Just after money. Could be harder than you think.
Yeah, I know.
Someone's back for more money? Wait a second.
Have a seat.
Support role.
I did warn her that this was coming after
Yeah,
that
you
report.
did. You did worry, but we needed the money right away. You may recall that several years ago when the Bureau of Land Management came out with their draft management plan, we took a look at that plan from an air quality perspective. Megan Williams is an expert out of Boulder, I believe, and we hired her jointly with Wilderness Workshop to take a look at all the various alternatives from that management plan at the time. And she did a report for us that was very helpful, we felt, in the review that we submitted to the Bureau of Land Management. And we are now requesting to do the same thing for the final management plan that we have until May 5th to potentially make a protest comment on if we had any protests regarding that plan. But at this point, we want an update from Megan Williams on the final alternatives to take a look at what might be affected with air quality. And as I sat and listened to your last discussion, I thought this is the nuts and bolts. This is the working part of that celebration we're about to have for the wilderness. The air quality is something that, along with water quality and all the natural resources, that I think through your funds, I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your intent is to develop a base analysis, if you will, so that we can make educated comments to those resource alliances that we have and help supplement, obviously, their budgets where they don't have a lot of money to do extensive work as well. So this is a request for $1,000 out of your fund, so you would end up with now what? You had 85.
One, so we'd be right
79.
around 80.
79.
At this point, so.
1,000. And this request is here before you right now because there is a deadline associated with it, and we would like at least 10 days ahead of Megan's final report to be able to bring you back comments that we may or may not submit based on what you'd like us to do for our comments to the BLM on that final management plan.
So I would add that Wilderness Workshop's putting in $500 and NRDC is putting in $1,000. So you're in good company if you choose to go this way. The reasonable foreseeable development scenario in the proposed RMP, Resource Management Plan, looks at 15,000 gas wells upwind of you in Garfield County over the 20-year life of this plan. So air quality is going to be significant, could be significantly impacted by those 15,000 wells. That's a big deal, I believe. And so we want to get this right. We want to make sure that the science is right, that the policy that flows from the science is right, and air quality is an extremely technical and complicated issue, and we cannot achieve those goals without having an expert witness, if you will, on our team doing the analysis.
And I might add to that one of our comments from the Board of County Commissioners through working with George and others, with George and with staff, and working on those comments at the time was an adaptive management approach, which requires that you have a baseline or some indication of baseline data so that if in fact you start to trigger any of those issues such as the Class 1 airshed, which surrounds Wilderness, and the Maroon Bells, which has a lot to do with not only the health of the air, but also the visibility aspect of the air quality, so that our visitors have a clear view of Maroon Bells, and that we're obviously breathing clean air as one of our goals through the environmental act that we have somewhere, Environmental Bill of Rights. Yeah. So just to pull that back into play.
Questions, Michael? So it says here, Cindy, that we had an air quality study in 2012.
Right.
And then there's a management plan that we're going to comment on, and that we're going to do an update of the air quality report. What does an update that mean?
Well, the update, and the way I use that term, is in association with the fact that Megan has already done a lot of the background analysis.
Megan is who again?
Megan Williams is the expert that did the report 2012, in 2012, that we used, and we would like to use her again to take a look at only this final resource management plan. And because we have a period of 2 weeks now, I think it is, to review that plan.
So this is to fund Megan to use the data from the 2012 plan to put in comments for the management plan.
For the final analysis, because the final analysis, or the final, if you will, preferred alternative for the plan, ends up being a combination of several of the alternatives back when we reviewed the draft. So it's not as easy as just pulling out, well, this is what alternative D would have given us. It's a combination.
Okay, so I understand better what you're asking.
Steve?
At one point, we had an air quality test place on the ranch. I think we ran it for about 2 years. I sort of remember being told that the Class 1 air sheds included the Flat Tops Wilderness area, I believe maybe Mesa Verde, and we got the same quality of readings on Capitol Creek. And that would be good baseline data from maybe 20 or 30 years ago was quite a while ago, and I'd actually be willing to do that again if we needed up a new test. In those days, we weren't getting the dust storms like we're getting now, which I presume a lot of that's probably coming off of BLM land. In to the west of us might be, you know, who knows where, partly Colorado, partly Utah. But that was done through the, I think Picken County Environmental Health is where we would take the filters when we changed the filter. So probably somewhere in a file that data is sitting there.
We
If
have
you
all
don't have
that data.
ready access to it right now.
Yeah, this year not only is the 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act, but it's also the 25th anniversary of Wilderness Workshop. And I think that Wilderness Workshop has led that program in air quality research for the last 20 years or so, where a lot of those stations were the information was gathered and through Wilderness Workshop.
Well, and we've got a monitoring station on top of Aspen Mountain that's is part of what's called the Improved Network, which is an interagency monitoring of protected visual environments, which means national parks and Class 1 wilderness area airsheds. And so we have this long-term data set that I think is 20 to 25 years old, and we've been doing it in partnership with the Forest Service, obviously, and with some contributions from the Healthy Community Fund to help fund that. And so I think we're good on the data. I mean, I never can say no to the data, but if it has to mesh, in a way that informs the data. But thanks.
And I think I misspoke. It's Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers' 25th anniversary, right?
Yeah.
Not yours.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we've been around
How long have
longer
you
than
been? here?
Well, I mean, Steve can speak to that better than I can, but I mean, I think the baby was born in 1964 with the passage of the Wilderness Act, and then formalized in '73 or something with it.
Even longer.
Yeah.
Rachel?
I support the request. We did just talk in our retreat about one of our 6 strategic, responding to external threats to the county. We've already gone, 99% of the way there in terms of previous study and having the baseline and the information. And, these comments are meaningful. It really ends up creating the stipulations and the decisions. And sometimes when they decide against you and the data was there, it gives you grounds to really appeal and overturn those decisions when poor decisions are made. So I'm fully supportive of going forward and finishing this off.
So am I. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next in our memos of interest are some thank you letters, the Aspen Camp for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, the Independence Past Foundation, English in Action, AVSC, the Buddy Program, Pathfinders, Reach Out and Read, Colorado, and Aspen Youth Center, all organizations that are supported through the Healthy Community Fund.
And that's it for MOIs.
Future agendas.
Yeah, so,
Excuse me one second.
Yes.
We had received a packet of information from Bob Throm, and I thought there was an email when it came out from Charlotte to say that we would discuss it during one of our next open discussions or MOIs. And I don't know if we need to kick it to the next meeting when you can have Brian here, GR, but I don't know if you had received that.
I got an email copy. It's not something that we would have put in for MOIs. I can certainly speak to some of it during open discussion if the board wants. I do believe Mr. Throm intends to be here for public comment
Tomorrow. Okay, so
Yeah.
as long as we're doing it at some point, I wasn't sure.
but we can talk about it during open discussion.
Thank you.
Open discussion, and if not, we'll push it on to tomorrow's public comment. Future agendas.
So, future agendas, I first want to talk about April 16th, because there are a couple of potentially competing priorities. A while back, we had passed out a schedule for a Colorado Wildland Fire Conference that's being held down in Glenwood Springs, and that's scheduled for April 16th and 17th. On the 16th, it starts at 1 o'clock, and I believe is all day, starting at 8 in the morning until 3:45 on the 17th. And this is a conference that talks about various aspects of wildfire in Colorado, costs, response, mitigation efforts, and it's really targeted at both public safety personnel, but also elected and appointed local officials who would be impacted by both mitigation efforts prior to a wildfire and recovery efforts after, even if we're not involved in the immediate response. And so we had passed out that information. The board was going to consider whether any individuals wanted to go. But before you jump at that opportunity, there's also another event happening on the 16th that really the other entities involved are sending one elected official, and it was an invitation from Marguerite Salazar in response to a letter that that I had drafted on the board's behalf requesting a meeting to discuss alternatives for Region 11 of the Health Exchange, the resort region, which is how can we do something about the high cost of the exchange health plans for our region. So we have been invited to a meeting on April 16th. That is in Frisco, scheduled, I believe, from 10 o'clock until
Frisco or Breckenridge?
It's the Summit County Courthouse, which is up in Breckenridge.
Oh, okay.
Listed on our
And I
schedule.
just talked to them, they said Frisco. There's been some confusion about this meeting, the various correspondence.
It's over one pass.
It is, yeah. It is our intent right now. I know Nan is planning to attend. I am working to clear my schedule to attend. I think it'd be important to have, frankly, I think it'd be important if we could have at least one board member of both of these events. So,
Rachel?
Yeah, I looked at my schedule yesterday, and certainly not trying to jump in line ahead of anybody else where they want to go or be, but we have CCI in Denver on Friday, the 18th, and so if I left early and went over the 16th, I could just, have a bye day down in Denver, and then I'd already be there, as opposed to driving back from Breckenridge and then back down the very next day all the way to Denver to line up for the 9 a.m. Friday meeting. So I could do the Breckenridge meeting if somebody else wants to do the fire symposium, but I just noted that it also says the potential of a hearing on Thompson Divide leases on the 17th, and if that was the case, then I would want to come back and see when the hearing is, and then go back down to Denver. So
There's actually 3 dates for the Thompson Divide, 15th, 16th, and 17th, at different communities.
Right.
But if you didn't want to have an extra day to go shopping in Denver, I would be happy to go over on Wednesday and just come back.
Okay, well, we could do it either way. I am already going a lot of the way down there, and I know Steve would be going down Thursday night probably, or early Friday morning, since he's an early riser.
Looking at my calendar, there's events on the night of the 16th back here and also on the 17th back here, so if someone else, I'd prefer not going to an extra meeting over there just because of...
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm saying it's really no problem for me because it's already half the way to where I have to drive the next time.
Okay.
So it really doesn't save that much, but I appreciate your effort on that, and maybe one of you guys can go to the fire symposium.
The public comment meeting on the 17th for the Thompson Divide, is that the one that's in Aspen?
I don't have that schedule right in front of me here.
I have it written down at the Aspen Library. I don't know why I
Yeah,
have
there was
to
one at the
remember,
Aspen
so-
Library, I know that.
Yeah,
But I don't know why that was the only one on our
This is how our
schedule. Was
schedule
that
says it, John.
just
It
because
says-
that was the only one that's in Aspen?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure. I had 3 to 6 o'clock, but that doesn't sound right. I think it's more later in the evening, isn't it?
Yeah, on the 16th, it looks like there's in Carbondale. On the 17th, it's in Pickens County. Maybe on the 15th was in Glenwood, but there's 3 days up the valley, so
Yeah.
you sort of pick and choose what date works. And
Yeah, it looks like April 17th is Picking County Library, April 16th is Carbondale Town Hall, and April 15th is the Glenwood Springs Community Center.
And I am happy to go to the meeting on the 16th at the Summit County Courthouse. I do have a rural resort workforce meeting that day, that morning. So I'm going to be in a meeting at one place or the other.
Yeah.
So take a coin toss if you think I'd be helpful at the meeting with Marguerite.
So you're saying you're already going to be over there?
No, I'm actually, that meeting is at any CMC location, and it's the same time, it's 10 to noon, so they conflict with one another. But the rural resort workforce, although I feel I give good input,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a lot of
Chatter.
It's 40 people on the board, and they all get on Skype, and it's basically a synopsis of what goes on. So,
Well, I would support Rachel going if that works for you. One of the reasons is because this initiative is being brought forward by Senator
Potential
Schwartz.
legislative.
By Senator
outcome.
Schwartz, and so it's good to be able to follow up with the senator through CCI or whatever.
Yeah, there could be I could see this going into a very quickly a late bill and a CCI issue. So that makes a lot of sense. Is there anyone who would be available for the fire conference? I actually really wanted to go to the fire conference too, but I think that the healthcare issue is probably a more pressing issue, and we're going to have other staff at the fire conference. Is there anyone interested in attending that?
I could probably do that. That's local, right?
It's in Glenwood Springs on the 16th and 17th.
You know,
I could probably make one day.
I looked at the registration form online today, and they did have one-day registration fees
Yeah.
for either the first or the second. So obviously, they weren't anticipating that people would necessarily make both days.
And the Wildland Conference, I had it on my calendar as a possibility, and actually I could go to the whole thing. It wouldn't conflict with my other stuff this evening, so.
and what staff do we have attending that? Do we have
Valerie, we've got certainly our emergency management staff and some of our public safety staff, as well as some of our fire district staffs. However, I think it's important because there are policy decisions that will probably be coming to this board over the next couple of years in terms of both preparation, mitigation efforts, and hopefully not on recovery efforts, but I think it's good to understand, or be able to have some background discussion on what does that look like for communities when that happens, and what do we need to do to prepare.
Yeah. I mean, it could be something that if George could go to the Wednesday and Steve went to the Thursday, he could leave from Glenwood Springs to drive down for a CCI the next day on Friday. Kind of lock those two together.
Well, why don't we look again, both of you registered, and I think if you both wanted to go and double up on a day, that's fine. We'll talk to you about. And then, Rob, you've got rural resort region, it sounds like, anyway.
on the 16th
On the 16th.
in the morning?
Okay. All right, I think we've got the 16th and 17th lined out then. We've got that
Yeah.
covered.
And just not to throw any more, but was it Chris Selden who put on the possible BOCC meeting to take public comment on the existing leases in the Thompson Divide on Thursday, 17th? I mean, on our agenda, I just, it's on our future agendas as a footnote on that week. And kind of beyond that, I guess I'm wondering, is someone preparing our formal comments as a board to submit, separate from the public comments?
Yeah, I think we can confirm with Chris, but I think he wanted to have a placeholder just in case the BLM was not going to actually take public comments, which is a little unusual.
Okay.
But they are, in fact, taking public comments.
Okay, so this is just no, doesn't mean anything
So that will
now.
probably come off now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Chris would be preparing our formal public comments.
Chris will
to the record.
definitely be the staff taking lead on that, yeah.
Okay. Great.
Okay, and then Just one other item to let you know, we're going to work, but Basalt has offered to do a briefing on their planning process they're going through, the Our Town planning process, and so we'll be scheduling a time for them to come up and talk about that.
Okay.
We don't have that nailed down yet. And that's all I have for future agendas at this point.
Any other additions to future agendas, Steve?
Well, on May 21st, which doesn't conflict with any of our meeting, but I will be going with Mary Barber from the Senior Center to Frisco. Well, it's in the Frisco area. I think it's in Frisco, the Frisco Community Place, and it's a senior. Let's see. Let me get the description right here. It's a senior award ceremony, and so Mary and I are going to go over and together to that, and I think there will be one senior volunteer from Picken County will also be going, and I'll be. They get county commissioners from different areas at that, and the way I understand it, and I'll be giving a little presentation. So.
Very nice. Thanks for doing that. I had one just coming up. I guess our next real executive session is Tuesday, April 22nd, and that will follow the most recent River District quarterly meeting. And I just would like that we have an update on the executive session items type from John Ely when we get when we have that executive session. So just one thing for that agenda. It seems we've kind of fallen behind on the River District updates, and to the extent any of it's not executive session material, fine to do it in public session. But I know a lot of their agenda is executive.
George?
We should schedule an update with Ellen and Cindy regarding the BLM resource management plan that we just talked about, so they can give us sort of a synopsis of what the decision has been, is, and then if we want to do any protests, as Cindy said, that the deadline for the protest is May 5th, we'd have the opportunity to direct staff in terms of if and what we want to see done. So that should come up pretty soon.
Yeah.
Any other future agendas? Open discussion.
Rachel had brought up discussing Bob's letter, so maybe that would be a good place for us. Thank you. I was just going to try and pull it up. Bob has been very consistent in raising requests regarding improvement to Snowmass Creek Road, and there's also an additional request regarding the county ceasing use of mag chloride, both of which are contained in the letter. We will, when we talked to Bob about the mag chloride issue, we had actually asked that be brought up at a caucus meeting and have the discussion come back through the caucus, and we haven't received any discussion. I don't know even if that discussion has happened at the caucus level at this point. Board members may have some thoughts about that, because I think there are differing views, and we tend to, when we have a request like that, try and defer or refer that kind of request to the caucus and get some feedback. That has not happened to my knowledge. We had some preliminary discussions with Bob about, and he had referenced that he's talked, I think, to both Brian and myself, and I do enjoy visiting with Bob when he comes in. The one funding mechanism that we had talked about was, the neighbors wanted to propose setting up a special district, which would be a taxing district for the purposes of funding and ongoing improvements on Snowmass Creek Road. I don't know if it's maybe a misunderstanding of who would take lead on
Okay.
setting that up. I talked to him about what those mechanisms look like and that there's a petition process and such. And perhaps Bob thought we were going to initiate that, but there hasn't been any real communication after that. But it is springtime, and this is when we typically do here, because the roads do get, they get muddied and they get rutted and they get more difficult to travel. And I think this is, probably why we're hearing about this now. So I can try and answer questions beyond that.
Rachel?
Well, I don't have a question per se. I know the background, and it was an unpaved road when it was developed in this residential neighborhood. We really haven't heard overwhelming support from others about getting it paved. I do think it's important that we hear back from the caucus first before we really start anything much further on this. It's always, are we going to start opening it up to more traffic by paving it, as my understanding, and then we'd have to get some rough idea of the long-term maintenance costs. But I think that it would be important to respond to Bob with, those things in writing that you just outlined, when you said we talked about it, and maybe you did give it to him in writing, but that way there's more clarity of our process, and he might even, if he's going to the Snowmass Caucus, need to be able to tell them what a special district would look like and what's the process of doing it and why they'd want to. So, I think just giving him that outline again, as we talked before, this is what we need to see to be able to bring it to a real board discussion, and this is some background information on special districts as well for when you present and talk with the caucus.
Steve?
Bob indicated in this current letter that the county has done nothing about this, and actually last summer the Road and Bridge Department did a lot of work on that, and I drove on it after, a month after they had done the work, and it was smooth and well maintained, and you could tell there was a lot more gravel had been put on it. So and I got 3 phone calls over the weekend, 2 from Upper Snowmass Creek and 1 from Elk Creek Road from John McBride about the condition of their dirt roads. And it is mud season. I went and drove on all parts of it. Now this morning, the county graded both Upper Capitol Creek and Upper Snowmass Creek. And so I told Bob I'm going to go up and look at it and just see, because there was one place that seemed like it was a safety issue when I drove on the weekend, where it was narrow and really deep holes. So I'm going to go up and just see what that looks like, and I'm sure it's, the county did what they had to let it dry out to a certain point before grading it, because it doesn't do any good if you grade mud around. It's just going to be, the holes will be there again. But the roads are getting drier now, and the county, I think, did the appropriate thing in grading it now. And so I'm going to, before tomorrow's meeting, I'll look at it, and I can give a report tomorrow what it looks like.
And I just note, to Bob's credit, he's always very thankful when we get out there with our road and bridge, but he wants a particular solution.
Yeah.
Other discussion? Steve?
We got a letter from Jenny Pingent, from CCI requesting feedback on
The child care welfare allocation.
Yeah, child care.
I responded to her this morning. I literally take all my cues from Nan on this because she's so close to it. And I forwarded on the Nan's letter to Jenna and let her know that Nan felt the bill's moving in the right direction and they support the different amendments. So I did already communicate on that.
Yeah, and I mean, my suggestion was that Nan is really our expert on all that, and
I've let them know that.
Totally respect her opinion on any of these. So,
yeah.
But I just wanted to bring it up for the rest of the board to know.
Yeah, Nan has really been a fighter for the small rural counties and population-wise, because otherwise the rules can really disadvantage us. And Nan had told me that she recently made a presentation on behalf of the 17 smaller counties to this kind of working group. And so she's doing a yeoman's job of, both administering our programs at home, but yet trying to influence the state policy so it doesn't negatively affect our reimbursements or our funding caps. So kudos to there.
Rachel?
Yeah, I have two things. The first was already answered, that we are going to have comments prepared on the BLM leases for us. The second is just kind of FYI, but Club 20 is, as frustrated as many are with the lack of any proposal or movement on how to fund transportation in the state of Colorado going forward. After the school amendment failed last fall, the Impact 64 group, which is all the counties working together, had done some further polling, and they just found zero interest in any sort of increased sales tax for it or appetite for taxes at this time. I shouldn't say zero, but they never get much above a 40-45% polling ratio. And so Club 20 is decided to survey its members as well, and other people on the Western Slope, and see if the Western Slope can come together to, present a proposal or a plan. And so I was going to check in with the board first to see if I forwarded that to John Peacock to forward that survey to all county, because they've forwarded to us as board members to say, can you get this out to your networks? It's one of the Survey Monthly online type of things. And so I was thinking I would forward it to you, George, maybe to see if RAFTA wanted to forward it to its drivers or personnel, or even just management to fill in a few of them. But they're just trying to look to see, is there any sort of path forward? Because we're all seeing it, just even this discussion of reallocating the regional priority monies based on population instead of loan miles. It's all very subtle attempts to funnel what little money is left to the Front Range, and we're going to be left kind of holding the bag out here. So anyhow, it's just a heads up. I'll forward the survey to you guys, and hopefully John can do an all county, and if anyone has networks that they would like to forward it to, for just give your input.
Other open discussion? Seeing none, I'll adjourn the meeting.
Good.
Thank you all. See you all tomorrow.
Thank you.